Today we're continuing our series on the big questions, and we're asking, what happens after I die? Now, there's a common perception, I think, of what happens when you die, which is that you die, and then your spirit goes to heaven or hell, and it stays there forever. And that's kind of, I think, what most folks think is what happens when you die. Now, the Bible is kind of vague on some things. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. It can be hard to get your brain around some of what it's talking about. There are some things that we're not really sure about. But on this, actually fairly clear and consistent. And what the Bible talks about happening when we die is not that. It's actually something kind of different. Same idea, but it happens differently. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today. And I go into this kind of hesitant. Because I know that we've all lost people we love. And we've all had moments of grief and doubt and loss and wonder. And it gives us comfort to think that our loved one has been instantly transported to somewhere else. And as you hear this today, I want to be clear about one thing, which is that what I'm talking about happens instantly. So nobody knows. And we're going to go back now to the Old Testament and look at kind of what that has to say. And in the Old Testament, there's Bible verses that refer to something called Sheol. That's an actual Hebrew word. And when you die in the Old Testament, they kind of had the idea that you went to Sheol, which is also referred to as the pit. It's where everybody goes after they die. It's not hell. It's not heaven. It's neither good nor bad. And the best way to describe it is kind of, you're nowhere. The Old Testament, that was how they looked at it. When you died, you just kind of went to some place where you did nothing and nothing ever happened. And they called that Sheol or the pit. And we read about that in several different places. One of those is the book of Ecclesiastes, which is a section of poems. And actually, to be perfectly honest with you, it's one of those books I can never find. Because it's little. It says, the living at least know they will die, but the dead know nothing. That's kind of the Old Testament view of what happens when you die. And you know, in the New Testament, it kind of has the same idea. When you die, you're just dead. And you're nowhere. And that's it. There is one passage that folks read, and we tend to think that this means, this is kind of where the idea comes from, the idea that we go to heaven right away. And this is what Jesus said. Jesus is on the cross. There's two thieves next to him, and one of them turns to him and says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus says, "I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise." Okay? Well, that seems to indicate that when you die, you go right to heaven. Interesting little thing about the New Testament is that when the New Testament was written in Greek, there were no capital letters, there was no punctuation, and there was no spaces between words. So if you ever get to see a Greek Old New Testament, the way, from way back when, it's just a long series of uppercase letters. And where does the punctuation go? Where does the capitalization go? We kind of have to figure that out in our interpretation and our ability to read it. So, where does the comma go? There's a big difference between saying, "I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise," and saying, "I assure you today, you will be with me in paradise." And this is really the only Bible verse that gives us a hint that it happens right away. What happens in most cases is what we read about in this 1 Corinthians passage that I just read a minute ago. Not all of us will die, but we will all be transformed. It will happen in a moment, in the blinking of an eye, when the last trumpet is blown. In the blinking of an eye, we're transformed. And that's the biblical view of what happens when we die. You die, and you're dead. actually dead. You're just kind of in the pit. You're nowhere. But it's like falling asleep. It's like taking a nap. You know, when you go to sleep, you don't remember it, and then all of a sudden, you wake up, and to you, no time has passed. So in that sense, it is instant. I mean, as far as any of us knows, when I die, I'm gonna die, and I'm gonna look up, and that's gonna be it. And then what's gonna happen after that? And this is the really interesting part. It's what Paul writes here. That when the last trumpet sounds, the Christians who have died will be raised with transformed bodies. The biblical resurrection, the biblical afterlife, if you will, is one of the body. That's why some religions, some religious groups, they don't like the idea of cremation, is because the idea that it destroys the body, and so if you destroy the body, there's nothing to be resurrected. Personally, I tend to think that if God can create the universe out of nothing, God can remake my body out of nothing as well. Maybe that's just me. But that's biblically, that's what happens. We will all be raised again in our bodies. And this time it will be, as Paul wrote there, a transformed body. It will be a perfect body. You know? I don't know if I'll be bald or not. I don't know if I'll have scoliosis or not. I know I won't have scoliosis, actually. Because the bald thing, I don't know. Does bald really matter? Bald is beautiful, right? That's what I'm saying. but the body will be perfect. It won't break down anymore. It won't get sick anymore. I don't know if we'll need food, but if we do, it won't make us fat, right? It'll just be for fun. It's a the biblical notion of the afterlife is one in which you have the same body that you have now. Now, the thing that we don't like about that is we don't like our bodies. Because there's something wrong with it. Because, you know, I'm bald, and I have scoliosis, or I'm too tall, or you're too short, or I'm too heavy, or whatever. There's all these reasons why we don't like our bodies. So when we think of an afterlife where we have our body, well, that doesn't sound real good, because I don't like my body. But that's not what heaven is. That's not what this afterlife is. It's not some deal where your body is broken. The big difference, okay, in the afterlife is not you. That's kind of how we look at it. We look at it like, I'm going to be different in the afterlife, and that's going to make things better. The difference in the afterlife